All right, greetings everyone joining us via Zoom and on Facebook Live. I'm Hillary Richardson, the coordinator of undergraduate research, and this is our fall 2020 Office of Undergraduate Research Faculty Mentor Panel. Let me share my screen with you. All right. Today's panel is being recorded and broadcast on Facebook Live via Zoom. If you're not able to join us, you can access the recording at Fant Library YouTube page, which I will post a link to on our Facebook page as well. I want to thank the faculty members who've agreed to be on today's panel. They're going to discuss some ways to get involved with undergraduate research in general, but you can also find specific opportunities like conferences, internships, and publications that facilitate undergraduate research at the OUR webpage, which you see linked on your screen. There you'll also find information on applying to participate in Summer Scholars, which is a program that gives students a chance to do independent research over the summer for a scholarship and for course credit. And the final opportunity I'm going to mention before we get started is the Undergraduate Research Conference, which will be virtual this spring. And you can present research and potentially win a cash prize for participating. All of these great opportunities are for building skills and your resumes and just having a good undergraduate research experience. So without further ado, I'm going to do some introductions before I get into questions of our panelists. So on our panel, we have Dr. Beverly Joyce. She is the art historian for the Department of Art and Design, as well as the director of the Mississippi University for Women Galleries. Dr. Joyce is from Memphis, has a BFA, has been a professional artist, has an MA in art history and a PhD in art history from the University of Kansas, where her major area of study was 19th century European art. She is the W's permanent gallery director, focusing on museum studies and curating many of the exhibitions in the galleries. She conducts research on works in the permanent art collection and has been at the W since 2003. Dr. Travis Hagee is an assistant biology faculty and is interested in why animals are shaped the way they are shaped. His research combines aspects of evolution, ecology, and engineering. He works with lizards and has done research in laboratory settings at natural history museums, as well as desert and tropical field sites in the US and internationally. He has worked with both honor students and independent research students conducting biology research at the W. Next, we have Dr. Reina Vergara. She has a twofold purpose in her research. First, she's interested in the executive function of the brain as it relates to language acquisition, and she explores individual and national attempts to escape oppression with a specific focus on colonial Mexico and Guatemalan texts. Her latest academic presentation was about the construction of the feminine as a justification for possession. Dr. Bob Sample received his Bachelor of Science at the University of Illinois in Springfield, his Master of Science at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, and his PhD at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson. He teaches classes in virology, microbiology, epidemiology, and most recently, he has emphasized the SARS-CoV, I'm not sure how to say that, Dr. Sample, you can correct me later, CoV-2 pathogens in his infectious diseases class. Dr. Christy Alpe is a professor in the College of Business. She received her BS at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, an MS at Mississippi State, and a Doctor of Health Administration at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Her latest research involves comparing patient and doctor satisfaction with manual and digital health records. T.K. Lee received a BA in Communication and Theater, a Master's in Secondary Education at Mississippi State University, and has received his MFA in Playwriting and Creative Writing at Spalding University. He has published a book of poems called To Square a Circle, and his plays are published and performed internationally. Dr. Laura Ball was the director of hearing and speech research at the Children's National Health System for 5 years before coming to the W. She earned her doctorate in communication sciences and disorders from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and her master's degree in speech-language pathology from the University of Tennessee-Knoxville. Dr. Ball works with individuals who have been diagnosed with neurological or degenerative conditions. Dr. Yoonmi Lee received her BA at Sukmyung Women's University in Seoul, Korea in 1993, her MA at Sukmyung Women's University in 1995, and her PhD at the University of Georgia in 2006. She teaches classes in family sciences, including aging populations, parenting, and contemporary society, and her specialization areas are intimate partner abuse, cultural diversity, women's issues, and qualitative research. Her current research interest is in immigrant and elder abuse. Dr. Christy DiClemente received her PhD in history at the University of Iowa in 2015, an MA in medieval studies at the Medieval Institute at Western Michigan University in 2006, and a BA in history at Millersville University in Pennsylvania. She teaches courses in world history, women in history, and special topics in medieval history. And her research interests are women's and gender history, the history of emotions, medieval legal history, and the history of marriage and sexuality. She's interested in the ways women used the legal system in medieval Europe and the expectations both men and women had within their marriages. And last but not least, Dr. Jill Drouillard received her PhD in philosophy from the Sorbonne in Paris, an MA in philosophy with a concentration in medical and political ethics from the University of Paris, East, Marne-la-Vallée, we practiced this and I'm still gonna mess it up, Marne-la-Vallée, and a Master of Science in Gender Studies from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Her areas of specialization include feminist philosophy ethics and the 19th and 20th century continental philosophy. She has research interests in the philosophy of sex and gender, bioethics, especially reproductive ethics, and social philosophy. So with that, let's get started with some questions. We have lots of questions and lots of panelists, so I'm going to kind of go down the panelists on my screen and kind of, I'll say the question and then I'll call your name and we'll go from there. So first, this question is for everyone. In your discipline, how do you define research in a sentence or two? And what does this look like in your work or the work that you've mentored? And we'll start with Dr. Bob Sample.
Okay, didn't expect that, but research in my field it's a hard science, so it really involves time in the lab, and a lot of the things we do involve strict lab work. So it's the lab. You could boil it down to one word: time in the lab.
All right, Dr. Alpe.
Well, research to me is more of an investigation. It's qualitative. I in particular use qualitative research a lot. So it's a lot of time in the library, researching articles and forming questions to ask as my instrument, open-ended questions so I can elicit more responses.
Dr. DiClemente.
So in history, you can do qualitative or quantitative research, but both of those are basically asking a question of the past and looking through primary sources, which are sources that were written at the time you're questioning, to find those answers. And so for quantitative questions, you have large bodies of sources that you kind of analyze as a body. And for qualitative research, you take a smaller sample of primary sources and kind of dig through them with a fine-tooth comb and see what they can tell us about the past.
Excellent. We already, just with 3 participants, already have an array of research practices, so that's great. Next I have Dr. Hagee.
And so for my kind of research, on paper it looks really similar to Dr. Sample's, but I think about it more broadly. It's just generating new knowledge. And so like everybody else, you've got to, first step is to come up with a question, and then you're answering that question either in the lab, in the field, looking at what other people are done and trying to draw new conclusions, looking at working in a museum. And so that new knowledge can come from lots of different sources.
Excellent, thank you. TK Lee.
Well, I think in an interesting way here for playwriting that research for me is endless. I think if we think of someone, I'm taking a broader scope here, going into a library, looking at all the books, trying to discover the research that fits them, for me, it's a lot more like the book is looking at you. And it is watching you come into it and recording and observing. And so you're constantly paying attention and learning to be aware, because your lab is the theater and the stage, but everything that goes on to the stage is something that happens in reality and in the real world. And so it's looking at learning how to read in your discipline, how to have content literacy, and also how to read people. So you're never really not, I'm actually doing research right now on all of you. So it's an everyday, all the days long thing to do. So.
Thank you. Dr. Ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically mine is kind of an overlap of many of these. In speech pathology, we can do it, very base or bench type research, basic, where we're almost in a laboratory analyzing acoustic signals of infants' cries, all the way to, doing comparisons of, interactions and treatment procedures to see which is the most effective. We can do retrospective and prospective projects. We do, most of what I do tends to be more quantitative, although there are many qualitative projects in speech language pathology as well.
Thank you. Dr. Joyce. Dr. Joyce, I think you're muted. We still can't hear you, Dr. Joyce. Not yet, but while we're working this out, maybe we can come back. Is that okay? Okay, we'll come back to Dr. Joyce. Dr. Vergara.
I won't speak for all of my discipline, but for me, research has three important components, especially at the beginning stages. I would say number one would be discovering a general topic or theme of interest. Number two would be practicing active reading and listening. What have others already said about this topic? And number three would be approaching the topic from your own unique point of view.
Excellent. Dr. Joyce, any progress? Not yet. Okay, we'll keep working on it. Dr. Drew Lard, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so philosophy is really just such a broad academic discipline. Philosophy literally means the love of wisdom. So any sort of research that is interested in knowledge production is by definition philosophical research. So it really depends on what your subdiscipline is. If you're a bioethicist, you may be sifting through case files of patients to look at different ethical practices. But if you're into something like aesthetics, you may be looking at artwork. So it really varies what your niche is in philosophy.
Excellent. I think we have Dr. Joyce back. Is that right?
Did y'all hear me? Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I don't know what was wrong. Well, anyway, so I'm in humanities. I'm art historian. I also deal with museum studies, and we base everything on the object. And looking at a work of art, we tease out information that could be about the artist. The artist is in a given time, a given place, creating this work of art, and we look at the choices that are made. For example, that artist makes. It may be an individual choice, or it could be something that, being in that culture, the artist makes this choice. And that to me is the most exciting part, because you can tease out things like gender issues or other social context issues. It's a way of approaching history using the object.
Excellent. Thank you all for that array of how we observe and interpret and gain knowledge by doing research. So let's keep going. This question is for Dr. Ball and Dr. DiClemente. What is an important characteristic you think an undergraduate researcher should have? Let's start with Dr. Ball.
Well, I think that an undergraduate researcher has to have a lot of characteristics. Certainly they have to have internal motivation and a desire to learn, to be actively engaged in reading, and really have the desire internally to answer a question.
Excellent. Dr. DiClemente, do you want to add to that?
I think it's the same for my discipline, which, and I think for many disciplines, students have to be self-motivated to do research, because I know in many disciplines, people do research together in the sciences and in the social sciences, but in the humanities, and history is kind of weird because it's both social science and humanities, but usually we're doing our research on our own. So we don't have like second authors, or 500 authors. I've seen some astronomy papers with hundreds of authors. And so students have to be self-disciplined, and they have to be willing to change their mind and alter their ideas, right? So for history, you go in with a question and you have a hypothesis, right? And then you see the sources, and often you can prove your hypothesis with the sources you had if you choose the right parts of it. But if you look at it as a whole, it may not say what you're wanting it to say. So you have to be flexible and change your ideas. You can't be stubborn with a research project like this. But I think a lot of it is really self-discipline. Like you have to, which I think I struggle with when I'm doing my research, but you have to, just do it every day or, regularly, so you don't fall behind. Research isn't something you can rush last minute and have it be good. So I definitely agree that being self-motivated and self-disciplined is a big part of research in my field, as well as being flexible about your ideas.
Excellent. So I'm hearing you all say motivated, disciplined, flexible, curious, open-minded, engaged.
Another thing would be accepting of and even inviting criticism or critiquing of their work. I think that's something that Dr. DiClemente kind of mentioned, in that we're always having to change what we do, and people will be reviewing and writing, and you have to be accepting and actually inviting, I think, of that feedback.
Wonderful.
And I just kind of want to add just real quick. So I just had an article. I have an article that's coming out in a book in the next year or so, and it went through 3 major revisions, right? So I think a lot of times students who do research papers or research projects like spit out an okay research project and then think that it's done. And when they get feedback saying, you really need to change this section, it's not working, they kind of take it personally, as opposed to it being kind of a criticism of, or not even a criticism, well, constructive criticism of the project. They often take it as personal criticism that they're not good enough, when in fact, this is all just part of the process, that none of us write a perfect paper or article or essay the first time around. It's essentially impossible. So I guess I just wanted to throw that out there too, that revision and like Dr. Ball said, accepting criticism is a really important part of the research process.
And I would even build on that more, patience and perseverance, especially sometimes in biology and science classes. Your experiment might not work the first time, it might not work the third time. You've got to keep going. and then you write up the paper, and then and then you have to do 4 or 5 drafts of it. You've got to keep grinding, which can be tough.
Thank you. Not once did I hear any of you say you have to be gifted, or you have to come from a certain background, or you have to have had certain experience. It sounds like all of these are characteristics anybody could have, and anybody could essentially build on and improve. So that's good to know. All right, this next question is for 3 people, Dr. Joyce, Dr. Sample, and Dr. Albee. What is a skill you've learned doing research that has served you well, either professionally or personally? And we'll start with Dr. Joyce.
Is my mic still working?
Yes.
Okay, good. Critical thinking skills, because you are evaluating text. This is kind of building on what Christy D. Clementi had said in the last question. It's the idea that if you're using your resources, texts, the authors all have a point of view, they have an agenda, they have assumptions that they're working from, and you have to learn how to parse this out and see if their argument actually works, if it can be used in your research. And so that's something that has helped, that served me well professionally, but it also gets into your personal life, because we have all this information bombarding us from social media, and they're saying that, you know, just because it's on the internet, it's supposed to be true. So it helps with critical thinking.
Excellent. Dr. Sample, what's something that you've learned? What's a skill that you've learned in your research?
I agree with Dr. Joyce, definitely critical thinking, but another thing that you learn in the molecular sciences is how to accept failure and build from it. Because a lot of the work we do, especially with viruses and pathogens, you set up the experiment, you run the experiment, and there's no guarantee anything's going to work. So you have to be able to look at it and say, okay, that didn't go as planned. That didn't work. We didn't get any results other than we know it didn't work. So what do we need to do to fix it? So it you know, accept failure, but also, what's the word I'm looking for? Not tenacity, but the ability to rebound and keep moving and just not give up.
Perseverance?
That would be a good word. Well, I'm not an English professor.
Okay. Amazing. Okay, Dr. Albee, what's a skill that you've learned from doing research that served you well?
Well, to be flexible, one, and to have set aside time and manage your time. I'm better at managing time from it, and patience, because it takes a while to get to the answer.
Yes, can you talk more about the time management that you mentioned and how that plays a part in your research, but also
Well,
in your life?
you just have to, you know, set aside time. You can't just think it's going to happen overnight. Schedule in your day, maybe an hour or 2 to work on it, to work on your project, maybe, and block out 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday. It just, you know, it takes time. You can't do it over a weekend. You can't do it in a day. You have to do it over a scope of time. It might take years.
Excellent. Does anybody else want to add to that? That I didn't call on?
I just want to add that, like, for the students out there, time management is hard, and it's a skill that you learn. Like, no one comes to college knowing how to manage their time for a research project like this. It's something that takes practice, and it's hard. And for me, this is my first semester teaching fully online, which means that I have no scheduled time. And even at my age and my career, having done large research projects, the first half of the semester, I struggled with time management. So if you feel like you're struggling with time management, it's not because you're not good at research. It's that time management is a skill, just like all the other skills that you're learning in college. And don't expect to be an expert at this skill right now. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
And I would add, I don't know if it was said or not, but in my discipline as a playwright, I'm crafting, entire worlds that are supposed to be through verisimilitude, like the other reality that we see, and take those lessons in a didactic fashion and make the world better. And in doing that, you have to have a lot of confidence. And you learn that by, I'm literally mapping out in language what I think about the world that I'm living in, and then compelling people somehow to come and watch my play and believe or not believe. So you have to learn a lot about yourself and to build confidence in your own voice artistically, to put that sort of thing out there, because it is a vulnerable place to be. And that is a skill I learned by hoping I'm doing the right research on the back end so that the front end gets the result that I want. So I would certainly say confidence comes with it. And I think with the time management, you come with an idea of it into college, and you're different when you leave. But confidence building skills like this is something I deal with every day. So I would say that is something that developed and got better. I hope. Maybe I'm just crazy instead of confident, but it feels the same to me.
Awesome. That's good advice, just for researcher, not researchers. Let's go to the next question. Did you participate, and this is for Dr. Hagee and TK Lee, did you participate in a research project when you were an undergraduate student? And if so, how did you find a mentor? Let's start with Dr. Hagee.
And so, yes, I did. It was a undergraduate research course on desert lizard ecology. And so there was a field course that was offered at my school. And so I just took the field course, and we spent 3 weeks camping in the desert in Southern Oregon catching lizards. And then after that class, the professor that taught that class, I had never taken any of his classes before, but I got to know him really well through the class, through the field course. And so I ended up doing research with him for a semester after the field course. And so that's how I found my undergrad research advisor. But for advice, I would just say start asking the professors that you're comfortable with, or that you like, or that are doing things you're interested in doing. And they'll be able to either point you in another direction or start crafting a project with you. So start asking questions, start talking to people would be my advice.
So you were hooked on lizards from the very beginning, it sounds like.
So when I was really little, I wanted to be a paleontologist, which was to study dinosaurs. So I've always been in that realm a little bit.
Just focused from the get-go. That's good. TK Lee.
Yeah, well, so I love the limelight. I like being the actor, and I like being on the stage. But one class that I took that was a research project for an undergraduate was all about theater management, and taught me a great deal of respect, which I thought I had the common sense of up front. But until you are behind the scenes and learning what happens off stage, it's really not the same. And it really creates a much more well-rounded theater artist. And so in this particular class, we had to pitch a show. And then we had to manage every aspect of it, the rehearsals, the raising the money for the poster sessions, all of that. And going back to my skill about confidence, it's one thing to learn someone else's lines and memorize them and deliver them in a safe environment in 2 hours and you're done. It's another to pitch yourself forward and say, I really believe in the project I'm doing, and then going into the community and asking for money to sponsor your program, for ad space, talking to people at the television station, the radio station. It changed my entire perspective, which I guess is why you do research at the undergraduate level. And that built my confidence, but it also taught me the importance of collaboration. As a playwright, I have the final word, but my vision and what I want seen has to be done by the director and the actors. And you can't get there and do it in the theater unless you have people coming to see your show. And so I learned a great deal in this research project of being assertive, of being confident, of understanding collaboration, and in a weird way. And I'm sure it's like this for other disciplines, but this particular class required me to know a lot about my area prior to finishing my degree. So we were always reading about theory in theater management, because if I go ask a business to sponsor me and I don't know how to talk about my discipline, they were less likely to help. And so that was a very huge turning point for me as an undergraduate. I wish that they had not waited until my senior year to take that course, because if I had taken that kind of a research based, even though it was more, you know, hitting the pavement, but you got to do that in theater if you're moving to Manhattan anyway. But it would have made a very big difference by the time I left 4 years later. Or was it 11 years? How long was I in school? I don't remember, but it would have made a difference to know that people speaking skills are important. Community is important. And that's another thing of the research that you can read about in a book, but you have to immediately apply it. It's something that you have to go out and do and prove it or not prove it, such as it is. And I would say for me, the lesson I took from that was patience and committing to it, committing to your vision. And there are going to be people who don't agree with you, or don't like what you do, but it's really more about, as an artist, developing liking what you are and who you are as an artist and your vision, because none of the criticism will work if you don't know exactly what it is you're trying to say as an artist. And anyway, I think I'm getting too excited about my question now, so I better stop.
That's a good thing.
There you go. That's my answer.
Chris, did you have a mentor or somebody who kind of led your artistic vision? And if so, how did you connect?
Yes, I did have a mentor. Well, that was the professor, but we had set up outside of class. She set up every 2 weeks, I think. I mean, I should have gone back and I'm just trying to remember from memory, but we met many times outside of the course in that semester. And I still actually call on her quite a bit. I still can turn to her. But there was not really anything prescriptive about it. It was just a check-in. I mean, it wasn't always come to the office. I would call on the phone if I needed to, or back when you had to dial the phone and they were plugged into the wall and whatnot. But it was fine, and that's how she worked with me, checking in all along the way. And that's important, I think, for undergraduates to not feel left alone, or that they're not, this is you, and here's the syllabus, here's the thing, do it, I'll see you in December. But to be able to check in and say, hey, try this, or sometimes they'll say no, and that's okay. And that experience makes a huge difference.
So for both Chris and Travis, for both of you, did you all initiate that connection, or did the professor of that class come to you and say, would you be interested in more research opportunities?
So I initiated that after the field course. He's the advisor I had is a super busy person, and so he's not out looking or trying to recruit students. And this was a kind of a middle-sized state school, and so research wasn't super common. Another thing I wanted to add, I think it's great that Dr. Lee is talking about this stuff, because I'm actually surprised how much of the things he's bringing up overlap even with something like biology or science. Collaboration, confidence, people skills. You have to write grants. You have to convince people to fund your research as you get farther along, not as an undergrad, but vision. You have to know what you're asking and know how to ask your question. So there's a lot of similarities.
And jumping onto that, it was sort of, I guess, built into the class. I mean, we were meeting during the whole time, so we didn't really have to set up anything specific to initiate during the semester itself, but it was left open, so I'd never felt like I couldn't call or couldn't initiate if I needed to. And we sort of had a general wash of when we would be available to meet if we needed to, if I'm understanding that your question. But I never felt like I couldn't have reached out to them. I felt very safe and provided for as a student. And I think that was a blessing. I think that's something the W does remarkably well. And it was an easy fit, because I remembered. I think that's the other thing too, is the impact it has on us from what we did. I mean, I remember having a wonderful time doing research, and I tried to put that in the classroom because I like learning. And it's, as a playwright, you have to know a little bit about everything. I mean, my search engine would get me in trouble, because I'm sure they would be like, why are you looking at how to do these things and make these things? But that's the representation of it. And you have to sort of be aware of it all the way around. And I like that I felt safe then, and I like making my students feel safe now. And research is scary. And people don't like to do it, or they don't know how to do it. But really, it's following your own bliss into it, I think, is the best way to hit the ground running. But I'm getting off track again.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I'm glad to hear that there are so many overlaps between disciplines that we sometimes think of as completely different.
This discipline works really well. I think we're good friends to other disciplines, because we are representing anything the subject matter is about. And I could easily see, if I decided to write a play about lizards and the ecology, I would do the research and I would want to talk to Dr. Hagee and anyone else, and I would spend a weekend, and if I got, the thing about it is I can change. Do another subject and then go down that rabbit hole. It's a lot of rabbit hole research, which is not the bet. You got to make it vetted and real, but that's how we get started.
Excellent. All right, the next question is for Dr. Doulard, Dr. Lee, who I apologize to because I accidentally skipped in the first question, but we'll have her answer it here. And Dr. Vergara, what advice do you have for students who think they might want to do an independent research project? And we'll start with Dr. Lee since I accidentally skipped her in the beginning.
Okay, finally. So first of all, I just wanted to say what is the research in my discipline first. So it is, our area is the interdisciplinary discipline. So then I'm just wanted to introduce about what the research should be start beginning with their own worldview. So that was my first question wanted to answer about it. And back to about the advice. Lots of things I wanted to say, but I'm just wanted to use a metaphor like it's a learning process, how you need to work integrate way, but it must be yet logically and ethically. So I'm just wanted to say this like build a house. So we've been already talked about it, and the research skill is a time management. You cannot build a house in one night. So you have to plan, have to have ideas and a plan, and have materials. You have to collect, then you have to involve in library work and conduct the survey or interview, whatever. So you have to have a desire to go on. Then you have to go all the process systematically way and put it in an effort. So it is hard. Takes a time, and it is a lot of, we already said that need a lot of revisions. And in the final touch, we need writing skills but still, it will have to wait until it is published. So it is a long time process. So you have to have a plan, and you have to have an effort to put in. But once it is done, you feel like you are so proud of your own product, and just put it in your portfolio. So the advice I wanted to give them is, in general, you have to have your own planner and construct or your own way to finish your work. Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Doulard?
Hi, yeah, the advice I would give, I would tell students to be wary of research ethics. So in my medical ethics course, we start off by talking about human experimentation. And we read this landmark article by Beecher where he talks about, he analyzes different case studies that are unethical. And he says that a lot of researchers engage in unethical research practices because of pressure to publish. So academics, we know that perish or publish mentality. Now, undergraduates don't have that type of pressure, but they do have pressure to have a good grade or for the sake of an evaluation. So that may cause students to, kind of throw their academic integrity out the window. So I would encourage them to be wary of plagiarism. They may come across an article and say, oh, this says exactly what I want to do, but make sure that you cite it. Also, don't fudge results. You may be tempted, perhaps you start a project with a certain idea or hypothesis, and the more research you do, it kind of takes you in a different direction. Don't be tempted to fudge results. Be honest in your project. I would also advise students to really take advantage of the resources that they have. So, go to the library, go to the archives, learn how to work through a database. I know when I receive papers from students and I ask them to cite a scholarly source, some may cite something like Reddit and well, that's not really a scholarly source. So what's a credible source? So educate yourself on how to tell the difference between a credible source and a non-credible source. So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you. And Dr. Vergara, what advice do you have for students who might want to participate in independent research?
Yes, I would say find the faculty member whose expertise is your area of interest and talk about it with them. Ask them ahead of time if they're available to help you process, answer questions, and point you in the direction of resources. For example, they might know of a class that will be offered within your topic of interest, and perhaps you could be taking that class along while you're doing your research. So your professors can be a great resource for you.
Excellent. And this last question is for everybody. I'm going to just go down the list of names on my panelists, but what's something a student might want to know about you in particular as a potential research project mentor? Say they want to come approach you. What's something that you might want them to know? And we'll go down the screen. So that's Dr. Vergara again.
Like you said in the introduction, my research is twofold. And so one of my areas, last year I published a chapter titled The Executive Function of the Brain is Applied to L2 Instruction in the Diverse Classroom. And it's about best practices for teaching a second language to students who are still developing their prefrontal cortex, and we're talking about this part of the brain. This is the part of the brain in charge of helping us plan. It is also the area of the brain in charge of working memory, impulse, and emotional control, and other executive functions that help either help or inhibit learning. But I'm also interested in exploring, and this is the area of literature, individual and national attempts to escape oppression. I specifically focus on colonial Mexico and Guatemala. More recently, however, I have been exploring the dynamic and possibility of the oppressed becoming the oppressor within the so-called minority groups in our current times. I will be very willing to help a student, to collaborate with a student on producing a paper that can be presented at a conference. I know that it was very scary for me to present for the first time at a conference. I wish, and like Professor Di Clemente said, this can be a very lonely process, researching our field. I'll be very willing to work a student to produce something that we can present together at a conference, and I can help demystify the process of registering for a conference. First of all, finding the right conference that will fit the paper, submitting the proposal, presenting, hopefully the paper will be, the presentation topic will be accepted, presenting together so that they can have that experience of doing it for the first time and not feeling so alone.
Thank you. Dr. Drouillard?
So I just want to echo Vergara and say that I would hope that a student would, approach me. I'd be very willing to help them find an undergraduate conference that they want to present in, or to tag along and see me present my research. But also I would want students to know that I'm a feminist pedagogue. And this means a lot of different things. One thing, if you're going to participate in feminist pedagogy, the researcher wants to look at their own social position. So as a feminist researcher, I take into account how my standpoint may affect my research and the questions I might ask and the results that I may see. Also, feminist pedagogy, it entails inclusivity. So when you're doing research, make sure that you're not just looking at major texts, but also minor text, marginalized voices. If you're going to do a research project, for example, if you want to know the different philosophical practices of women in Columbus, make sure you're not just looking at one sample of women, but different interstices of identity, so that you're not misrepresenting a monolithic group of women. And feminist pedagogy, it also entails kind of criticizing this competitiveness that we are often taught, that we're taught how to win a debate and sometimes be aggressive in our criticisms. But a feminist pedagogue really wants to embrace constructive criticism, as Dr. Di Clemente had mentioned. So that's what I would want students to know.
Awesome. Dr. Lee?
First of all, just two of you said that I'm also the qualitative person, and then I'm based on a constructive grounded theory. So most of it, like I'm trying to find the participant voice just together. So not just I'm in a positions of what is the answers of what the question that I have. So we are like working together, and it is really helping in my teaching and my research and my guiding students. So so I think that students can come with their own research topic, because we are in a social science integrative discipline. So I'm not, it is the topic is really various. It's varied, and I'm not an expert out of it, but still we can work together and finding, because I can just guiding just like going through the methodology aspect. So that's part. And I'm also, I wanted to students know that I'm open to the students' arguments. They have their own thoughts, and then when I give them a feedback, they can argue back to me, and then we can learn together. We can find a way. So that is something, and I'm just asking them, whatever the question you can ask me, there's no dumb question. So the asking a question is the one way they just progress their research. So they just, I do not want the student to passively receive my comment and just revise by them. So they just keep going back and with me. So I want the students to know about it. Then the other part is that, but students still rely on me to learn how to organize their thoughts and systematically, logically, and also the ethical issues. And one of the things I can just guiding them to it. So I'm just like open to the students, like you can come, ask whatever the topics, and I can refer to some other faculty too. So I'm just to try to be a little bit friendly to them, because the research itself really afraid topic to them. So I'm just okay, this is not a hard one, but we have to start together. So that is advice I wanted to give them as students.
Thank you. Dr. Hagee, what's something a student might want to know about you as a potential mentor?
So I think one of the first, when I meet a student that is interested in doing research with me, I think the first thing that needs to happen is, like a couple people have already mentioned, you've got to kind of work with the student, figure out what kind of project works for them, depending on what kind of career path they're looking at, and then where do our interests overlap, and what kind of project can we build that's going to be valuable for everybody. And so along those same lines, typically when I do research with an undergrad, the end goal is going to be presentations at conferences and a publication. So we usually have to build the project with that end goal in mind. And so, yeah, so that's worth thinking about. If you're going to come to me to do research, our end goal is going to be doing publishable level research.
Great. TK Lee.
Well, first of all, they should know I always have aspirin, because headaches are going to come through a lot of this process. And that I'm not messy, but I believe in keeping a hard copy of everything, specifically in this digital age. But aside from that, what they should know about me is that I'm a bit of a bulldog when it comes to research. I'm relentless. I love to read, I love to learn, and I will keep pushing in a soft way and not off a cliff, but I will keep pushing them to keep opening their own doors. If I find a door closed, I'll just knock a wall down and keep looking until I find the thing that I need, because in the representation of crafting a stage for the story, facts can't be fictional. You have to know the truth, even in your search for the emotional truth, which is what philosophically, in a way, that we do in playwriting. But I would also say that what I can give to them is what Dr. Vergara was saying too. It's a networking opportunity. It's hard to do research. It's good to know others. You have to stand on their shoulders, right? You know, to get your word out there, to give it validity. And that networking is something that I know very well in theater, because most of what we do, a lot of what we do in the arts, is built on an honor system. And you work well and closely with these people and other research outside of undergraduate careers, and you develop lifelong relationships. And that's part of what I think we should be here to do for the students as well. So I'm all about opening doors where I can, and I'm all about introductions, and I'm all about telling them to exhaust the content of what they're after as much as they can, so to whatever it is their subject matter is about. So I think it helps them to not feel as lonely. I mean, I'm just an email away or a phone call away, but it's helping to know you're not yelling into the void in a lot of ways to do that. And even if it's just comfort that I give them, I offer that. I'm here to be their advocate and their champion. So
there's a lot of good quotable things in that little bit, especially pushing.
But I worked on it.
Cliff in a soft way, not off a cliff, but. Dr. Ball, what's something a student might want to know about you? Oh, I think you're muted, Dr. Ball.
Right in. I was going to say I really agree with essentially everything that Dr. Hagee said. You know, it's interesting because I always talk about making it count. And that basically means, you know, you create your question and you develop the project and you do the project, you present it, you send it in for publication, and you know, keep talking about it as much as you can. And I know that particularly, I think with undergraduate research, a lot of times people will come to me with huge questions. And so one of the first things that we start working on is trying to narrow the question. And so, you know, there's timelines are short, so we have to kind of get down to things pretty quickly. And so that's what I would say, you know, overall, you know, narrow things as much as possible. Make it count.
Dr. Joyce.
Okay, so with my research, my background that I'm interested in right now is Southern women artists who are dealing with gender issues. So I am thinking in terms of, is there a Southern voice in feminist art? In terms of museum studies, which is where I have most of the research assignments, the students, I have a regular museum studies class, and I have museum studies interns. The museum studies interns have done research on an aspect of our permanent collection, and they then get to be the student curator. They do gallery talks. It's about professional development. They get to put this on their resume. My museum studies class, this semester we're doing something a little different. In the past, the class worked on one exhibition that they co-curated. But this time they're doing fantasy exhibitions that I will take their designs from their fantasy exhibitions and create another exhibition at the beginning of the school year next semester. But they get to they get to develop their research traditionally, but then they flesh it out into 3 dimensions. They think in terms of what kind of objects I would put in an exhibition so that a visitor could actually experience it. And so it's an interesting take on how to present an argument, present their research.
Thank you. Dr. Sample?
I think a student needs to know that when they come into my lab, that they really need to open their mind, so to speak. You know, I'd echo some of the things Dr. Hagee said in the fact that we want to publish. I mean, that's the whole idea, is to contribute to the academy and the field and science as a whole. But they need to look at things as everything's a potential, you know, breakthrough or something new. It's a former department chair of mine used to say, you know, he handed me a quote one time. It said, "Chance favors the prepared mind." And, you know, great discoveries in science aren't heralded in with eureka. It's more like, That's odd. And they need to be able to do that, because one of my papers was published on the simple fact that I was lazy, left work, left a film in a gel box over the weekend, came back because I didn't want to go back, drive an hour back to develop a film. And Monday morning I developed it. I looked and I was like, oh, wow, there's the protein band we've been looking for. And there's where it's not supposed to be. So you've got to, come into the lab and expect anything. And some of the experiments we do, it's just to do. There's really no hypothesis. It's, I wonder what would happen if. So students, they need to be flexible. They need to understand that I kind of do things in a very strange way. I've got former students that are finishing PhDs at institutions around the country that still email me and say, yeah, remember when you told me how to convert cell count into surface area and vice versa? And that's not supposed to work, but it does. We do things some very odd ways, but they work. So they just need to be ready for something different, I would say.
Good to know. And with the last 2 minutes, I'm going to try to squeeze our last two panelists in this question. Dr. Vergara, what's some advice you have?
I think I already went.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who am I missing? Dr. Alpe.
Well, my background is in electronic health records. You should know that about me. If they come to my office, I can help with qualitative research, and I'm very approachable, and I'm willing to be their guide along the way.
Excellent. Did I get everybody? Am I missing anyone?
You're missing me.
Oh, Christy, I'm sorry. Dr. DiClemente, what's something a student might want to know about you?
So I teach all history classes pre-1900 non-US, which is a lot, which means that although my research is on medieval Europe, I often and am willing to mentor students who do a variety of different projects. And the reason I can do this is because one of the things that you learn in the history program is how to evaluate sources and ask questions of sources, even if you don't know what they are, right? Even if you haven't seen them before, it's a skill that's trained. It's not an innate skill. And I think in all the disciplines, it's the same way, right? You're training your brain how to think about things in a particular way. And so for me, I am willing to bounce ideas off of people. But the other thing I want to say, and I think this also goes for everybody, is that if we don't know something, we probably know someone who knows that thing. Like all of us have networks all over the country, all over the world, of other scholars who are in our field, but study something slightly different. And these networks, we can call on these networks to help you with your research. And I also am perfectly happy emailing a random scholar in my field with a question that a student may feel really uncomfortable doing, but I'll just say, yeah, I'll email them. I mean, the worst that'll happen is they won't email me back, right? And I think all of us are probably willing to do that as well. Like as TK Lee says, we have the confidence of our knowledge and our scholarship to reach out to people who we don't know to help you with your research. So I wanted to put those two things out there.
And on top of that, Dr. DiClemente, I would even add, if we don't know the answer, we probably know somebody who does. And if they don't know the answer, then nobody knows it. And then it's a good research question, which undergrads can come up with, which undergrads do come up with. And so, yeah, so that totally happens too.
Excellent. There is one question from somebody in chat, and I know we're at time, and we're at an hour, I should say. If you have a second to stick around, I'll ask this question for the recording. If you have to leave, though, I totally understand that as well, because we're all very busy. But I am going to ask this question because I think it's a really good question. And this is from, well, I won't say it because they sent it to me privately, so just in case. This is from somebody in chat. It can be, all caps, very intimidating to approach a person with the expertise of our professors regarding research. As an undergraduate, do we wait for research opportunities to become available and choose what interests us from a list? Or do we approach the professor with an idea that we're passionate about and want to further explore? And I have been given permission to say who said this, and it was Karen Love. So what would you all say? This is an open-ended question.
Can I jump in quickly to say before I need to head out is that I have tried something very different this semester with that very idea, because I used to suggest the topics and give them ahead of time, and they always had it in the syllabus and plenty of time to do it, and every time, sometimes almost, they don't do it on time, right? I'm using the word time too much. So I this semester adopted letting students come to me with their research ideas, and it's magnificent, the change. And so I personally say, don't wait on me, come to me. If you have something that you're interested in, it is a lot easier to fuel the fire of getting through the research to do it. And if it's their interest already, it's less the babying and comforting, and it's just getting to it, and it's more exciting for both of us. I want to not have to build every piece with you. I want to jump in and dig with you. And if you've already got a hole dug, that's a lot more exciting. So come to me always. I'll never feel intimidated. I know it can be, but just say, hey, I'm in your class and I'm interested in this, and I'm going to champion it as much as I can. So for me, I like that idea.
And I would add also, you spend so much time on a research project. If you are not committed to that topic, it's going to be hard to see it out. It's better to follow your passion.
I would just say that the worst a professor can do is say, I'm not interested. But with me, I'm always willing to listen to a student, because the thing is, if it's a good idea, okay, down the rabbit hole we go. Because that's what science is about. It's all about finding things out. And if it's a question that's never been asked, and if we can do it, sure, let's go.
Excellent.
Same thing. Approach, approach, approach.
I would add to that I remember the first time I approached a professor about, I wanted to talk to them about an area that I was interested, a topic that I was interested, and I wasn't very clear. I just said, I want to talk to you about my research. It was a very intimidating conversation, because the expectation that the professor had is that I was well beyond where I was. I was at the beginning stages. I was just exploring this. And he was asking me, what's your research question? Where are your resources? And he expected so much from me. I was drowning, right? So from the very beginning, be very clear as to what the purpose of your conversation will be. I am exploring this still. I want to talk to you about this. That way your professor knows how it is that they can help you when they have this conversation with you.
We have another.
Oh, just along those same lines, I just want to say that if you have a vague topic in mind, give us that too, because we can do some initial digging and say, okay, if you have this topic, here are 3 other people who have researched something similar. Take a look at those to give you an idea of, where you can go with it. So, give us as much information as possible, so that way we can help you even ahead of time.
Excellent.
And I know you're trying to move on, Hillary. Karen's in one of my classes, so that's awesome that she's in here asking questions. So yes, come approach us. And on top of that, I want to add, saying I don't know is totally okay. Because like some people have mentioned, when a student comes to me and is going to start and is interested in research, I'm going to have a whole bunch of questions. What are your career goals? Where are you at already? What are you interested in? So that I can start giving this helpful advice, right? So I can start pointing them in different directions or working on a project or whatever. And saying I don't know is totally okay. And then we can also, that helps us gauge where we need to go next. So I don't know is totally okay.
Jill, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say also, if you certainly approach your professors, but if you're an undergraduate student and you're really interested in doing research and you think that you want to continue doing research after your undergraduate studies, I would really encourage students to look into summer programs, because things like that is really going to give you a one-up when you're applying to, to continue education to your graduate studies. So yes, ask your professors, but also take the initiative to look into things like summer programs in your field.
Excellent advice.
One small tips for the undergraduate students, just approach the professor first. Do not share the fear with the peers. They just share the fears about the research among the students, and just afraid to knock the door of the professor. So just do not share the fear among the students, just to knock the door first. So that is my the advice to the students. A very small tips.
I'm so glad you all are willing to share this, because to me it says how interested you are in student success and student involvement. And I think that's something that sometimes students might forget, that you're here to help them and, like Chris said, be their advocate. For those of you who can stick around, we do have one more question. Also a very good question. This is from Angelica James. She says, I'm a senior who's graduating this semester. I do not have prior research experience, but I am interested. My question is if it is possible to gain research experience once you're out of school, even if it is just volunteering and helping around.
So I would say yes, totally. So if you're still a student, there's a couple different angles you can take for research. You can try to get credit for it, or you can try to work with a professor to try to get paid to do it, kind of as an employee kind of the university. So those are two angles you can take while you're still a student. After you've graduated, there's even more angles you can take. Volunteer, unpaid internships kind of stuff. You could be hired as a research assistant, so try to get paid for it. You could get hired as a lab tech in a more permanent type position to get paid to help doing research. You could still enroll as a student in field courses, summer courses, even if they don't count towards your degree. So yeah, there's lots of different angles you can still take.
I just want to add a lot of the stuff that Dr. Hagee said is true for history and other social sciences as well. And I know when I graduated from my undergrad, I needed to, so I wasn't actually a great student, so you can still do research even if you were not a great student. I was probably a CB student in undergrad, and so I decided I wanted to go to grad school kind of late, and I took 2 years off and continued taking classes at my alma mater while I was working. And that allowed me more experience in the classroom and foreign languages in particular, because as a medieval historian, nobody spoke modern English, and so I needed languages. But it also helped me boost my GPA so I could get into a better grad school. And you can still take classes as a community member if you're interested in that. But also in history, there are organizations, nonprofit organizations, museum organizations, archive organizations where you can do paid internships or get jobs with an undergraduate degree. So there are different ways of approaching research after you graduate. And if you're interested in that, I definitely recommend talking to your advisor or a mentor or a trusted professor who can kind of point you in the right direction for your field.
We have had some excellent questions. Does anybody else in Facebook land or Zoom land have a question for any of our panelists before we close out for the afternoon? All right. Well, I will be sending links to the recordings to this. I will be sending, well, mostly just that, I think. I also want to say thank you to our panelists for your time and your expertise and really your compassion toward student success. Thank you so much for joining us, and it was a pleasure having this conversation with everybody.
Thank you for having me and for inviting me.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
Internet land.
Thank you. Bye.